That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about The Beta Test, the fourth film directed by Jim Cummings, which he co-directed with his co-writer, P.J. McCabe, which premiered at the 2021 Berlin International Film Festival in the Encounters Sidebar program. And it is being released, courtesy of IFC Films, November 5th, 2021. Can I just add that, as we all know, the Berlin Film Festival in 2021 was virtual, so this film was actually not available to screen to press. I know that they had select private press screenings in Los Angeles, and I do know of a few journalists who personally went to Jim Cummings' house to see this film. And then when it played at Tribeca, which was also a virtual film festival, they weren't giving out screeners then. They really held on tight to this film.
You were telling all these people's business.
Well, I'm just saying, I find it very annoying that if you're going to have a film as part of a virtual film festival, that it be available virtually on the same platform to everyone. Because if it was a physical film festival, we would just be strolling casually in there to watch it.
Wow. All right. Equal rights. Okay.
Equal slave for equal pay.
So, I'm familiar with one other film directed by Jim Cummings.
We reviewed The Wolf of Snow Hollow, but his 2018 film Thunder Road, which I think won the top prize at South by Southwest, is excellent.
And I enjoyed The Wolf of Sleepy Creek or whatever. I did enjoy it. And I do like Jim Cummings.
Yes, as a screen presence. And we just saw him in Halloween Kills.
That's right. And I enjoyed him in that film as well. This movie was interesting.
It is a conversation piece. I don't know that it works as well as it should.
Yeah, I would say it's a no for me.
Yes.
But it was fun to talk about.
Yes.
Okay. The basic story is Jim Cummings plays a man named Jordan.
Jordan Hines.
Jordan is like a Hollywood agent. He lives in LA. He's trying to live the life. Drives a Tesla, lives in a fancy building. He is engaged to a woman named
Carolyn.
Played
by Virginia Newcomb.
Okay. One day, he gets a letter in the mail, and it's an invitation to an anonymous, no strings attached sexual encounter. So he reads it. His fiance is there at the mailbox, so I think he gets nervous and is like, oh, it's nothing, and throws it away. But that night, he starts like dreaming about things and then gets up, dumpster dives, finds the invitation, RSVPs. Then he gets a package in the mail and it's a hotel key. So he's supposed to go meet this random person to be sexual. He does. He really enjoys it. And his life devolves from there because he's obsessed with this woman he had sex with. And he doesn't know who she is because they were both blindfolded. Which is important, I think, to the mechanism of how this works. Mm-hmm. Okay. He's starting to lose it and during this time, he's trying to investigate, first he wants to find out who this woman is, but then turns into, he wants to know who's sending these messages, and he finds out. It turns out there's this albino white man in a basement somewhere. Mm-hmm. Who has created, he's basically data mining and has created an algorithm that he thinks will match people perfectly romantically, mm-hmm. Which I also have issue with because really it's about these sexual encounters, these no strings attached anonymous sexual encounters. But he sends them an invitation after he picks two people to match. If the person RSVPs, then he sends the key, and then the third message he sends is, oh, if you want to meet this person, you have to pay me $5,000 and I'll give you their info.
For the perfect match.
So Jordan confronts this person with the intention of killing him, but he doesn't. He goes home, sees his fiance, and basically tells her the truth about what's been going on. And it's implied that maybe she also received an invitation, so she says to him she forgives him, and they decide to run off from their lives. They pack up everything, and it sounds like they're going across the border, I'm assuming to the north or south. It's not clear, but it looks like they've been traveling north based on the shot we get.
Sure.
And
but then all of a sudden they're like, we're a day away from the border. So it's like, Mexico? You haven't been on the road that long.
Yeah, so then it has to be Canada because they would have reached Mexico within hours. So that's it. Yeah. This shit was wild. Because it is doing a lot.
It's doing a lot because in one sense it's a Hollywood satire of the technological...
Well, let's break it down. So what are the stories that it's trying to tell? The Hollywood satire.
It's kind of a post... And also the effects of like post Me Too and about the changing landscape of Hollywood. He works as an agent for this firm called Ape, which has very Eugene O'Neill vibes to me, and how they, as a mechanism in Hollywood, are diminished because there's this whole... They're trying to get this Chinese client... which is a big thing in the first half of the film, and he basically tells him the last thing we need are agents pretending to be producers.
Well, so you have to break it down because then it's like, yes, there's this sort of like post-Me Too movement where these characters feel vulnerable. Mm-hmm. Then there's like literally like their jobs are like they're told that they're not like they're obsolete. Then
this kind of white male toxicity.
Then you have this main character like trying to keep up with the Joneses basically, but then you also have this like exploration on data mining, and there's this like really I think basic ass scene where PJ, Jordan's like partner at work, explains to him what data mining is and like how like Facebook sells information, like stuff that we already know.
Sure.
So it feels kind of, well, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. It's not very elegant in that way, but in the same sense as when PJ, that's the co-director playing a character named PJ, is also giving a talk to other agents at the firm, which also feels very basic.
Is that PJ giving the talk? That's not him.
Oh, I thought it was.
It's another character who looks like him. And I wrote this down because then, so on top of all these things, then you also have like, there's so many topics. Like at the agency they work in, there's this character who looks like PJ, who every time we see him, which is I think 3 or 4 times, it's like he's teaching a group of people about being an agent. So I wrote down like, is this like an agency school? Like what?
Yeah,
what
it's very curious. But we have to have that sequence where he tells us about how our data is sold to explain to when we finally get to what this beta test is. Because the film opens on what seems to be a completely unrelated scene. This Swedish woman calls 911 about a domestic dispute, which we find out how it's related, but is murdered by her husband, saying that she's unhappy. She got a purple letter in the mail and had random sex, and now she realizes that she needs to leave this marriage behind, and he kills her.
Okay, well now that you brought that up, you have to explain. So then this woman you described received the letter, and what is happening is these people are meeting these random people for sex and having such a strong connection that they feel like they can't go on without them. But because their lives don't allow it, it seems like they end violently because that lady, her man, kills her. Then we see another character, like we're at a funeral and we see that the woman died and the husband looks suspicious, like he knows what happened. Then you have there are 2 more characters.
Yeah.
The Chinese businessman. We find out he's married to a woman, but he's getting into gay shit. So the wife finds out and kills him. Mm-hmm. Then the Chinese guy was having sex with this black man. There's just some random scene where we see this guy talking to his wife, and then he just drops dead while smoking a vape. Which vaping is also a pretty big thing in this film. I don't know the symbolism of the vape.
Well, except
it's a vice. But.
Well, it's a vice, and also it's kind of commonly a motif of showing that somebody's kind of a douche.
Okay, but getting back to the original thing about all the topics, so then you have that, but then you also have like the idea of monogamy and how many people feel trapped, and that's why this beta test and this game is working.
For this algorithm. This should have been called Slave to the Algorithm. Again, all of these components just don't make sense because we aren't taking into consideration the very human variables of sexual attraction and interaction that on paper just don't work. And I think immediately as this film opened, I turned to you and said, this feels like something that was conceived and written for straight people, because it just...
I think the issue, I understand what you're saying. I think what it is people who don't necessarily abide by traditional, conventional ideas of monogamy and marriage, these topics don't seem that taboo, certainly, but certainly not to the point where like someone ends up dying because they can't be with the person they want to be with. So that feels very... you said something like it feels like a 1950s...
It feels like if we had these kind of technological advancements with 1950s mentality.
Yes.
And then it's... I think Cummings and McCabe are trying to delve into that kind of white male toxic masculinity, if you will, because there's scene after scene after scene of him like kind of acting out, where if he was a white woman we'd call her a Karen, but which I guess those women are just emulating the men they're with, because that's all he's doing. He's just throwing temper tantrums over and over again. But the catch is this rigidity of this artificial world that he lives in, and this keeping up of appearances is also an important motif, because we want to pretend that we all have this, bright and shiny monogamous lifestyle, but there are these, what's painted as dark and seedy desires that everybody's getting up to underneath it. Because even the gay characters in this, these are closeted gay men, which I don't know that the film is trying to make this point or is maybe more subversive than it actually intended to be, but then it makes it seem like those who live more open sexually and expressively wouldn't be caught up in this game.
I think the story is trying to tackle too many topics. What would have worked better for me, well, I like to say what I'd rather a movie be, so I'll do that too, but I think working within what we were given, it needed a lot of editing, and I think it could have just been, we spend time with Jim, or
it's funny you mention that, because
Jordan
Cummings edited it himself.
I don't mean like literal editing. I mean like this story feels like two people were probably like drinking one night or at a restaurant talking like, oh, I have a story idea, and they come up with all this bullshit, and then they write the story and never revisit it. Like, maybe all of this doesn't necessarily work, because what I think could have worked really well is we understand Jordan and why he feels trapped in the relationship he is, because we don't understand why he grew. If I were a straight male who sort of is abiding by conventional standards with regards to relationships, and I receive an invitation in the mail to go to an anonymous sexual encounter like weeks before my marriage, I would think that shit is a setup.
It's a trap. It's
a trap, and he just is like, I'm gonna do it. And then I think, okay, but if you're me and you receive an invite to an anonymous sexual encounter, which happens often, it's like, it doesn't seem that wild and crazy, and there are rules to abide by, and it just feels like whoever came up with this probably has never done things like this, so they think it's like, it just doesn't seem feasible.
It just asserts that whether male or female, whoever is being cheated upon in this algorithm, because their partner has been subjected to an algorithm that is so good that they will leave behind their life for this perfect match, which ostensibly is somebody that you haven't seen if you kept a blindfold on, and obviously haven't exchanged information with, which is why you still need this intermediary to pay $5,000 to.
What's the movie with the song Worn Leatherette?
Antebellum.
No.
Oh, Crash.
Crash.
Well, that song is actually not in that movie, but it was written for...
Well, I'm referencing Crash. This film gives me Crash vibes in the sense that it feels like someone who's not very sexual or doesn't have experience with sort of darker or more... I don't want to use negative language, but like someone who's... It feels like that film felt like... Who did that?
Cronenberg.
Yeah, like I mean, I was looking at pictures of him. He doesn't seem like he gets down like that. So I think it's like an interpretation of something that you don't really understand. And this feels that same way. Like, if you... we were even saying, like, just everything about this scenario feels so off. And not to say that it's not a perspective, but then I needed to understand, like, why this character felt comfortable proceeding. And then the other gag is the explanation of the algorithm is that it's basically like what all these social media sites do, which is like they take all aspects of your purchasing habits and your age, your perceived income, and align you with certain advertisers. So that's essentially what this albino in the basement is doing with people. But to have an amazing NSA anonymous sexual encounter has very little to do with who a person is. It's about how good they are at sex. And the whole blindfold thing is important because this entire premise relies on the two people who meet staying blindfolded and not knowing who the other is and not exchanging information, so that they would be willing, like so crazed, that they would spend $5,000 for their contact info.
Right. Well, because it's also, the beta test is testing it on people to see how it would work, obviously, but for people that are afraid of being recognized as well, like to explain why somebody would keep the blindfold
Yes.
on.
So then this is where I thought, a better movie would have been if there was like an app, like if they want to do this whole like beta test algorithm thing. What if there's an app like Raya, where it's like people who can afford or who are famous who want to meet others and they want the perfect match, but only one so the non-famous, non-rich person who they get matched with has to stay anonymous, and maybe play with all the subversive elements of that and how it could evolve into something very dangerous, because the opening scene had me thinking that this would be a promising movie.
Okay.
Like, it could be a thriller, but then it just ends up being like mildly comedic because of
Cummings, who's very good at playing like
who I enjoy.
raw nerve.
But a lot of this
anxiety.
acting was like, then his character seems kind of like a buffoon. But then he also can't be that stupid because he has this career, and then there are moments when he actually seems quite bright. So I didn't like that.
It reminded me of two David Robert Mitchell films. One, because of this opening, which ends up feeling much more stylized and kind of removed from what the essence of the film is, really, is It Follows, the STD horror movie, which I don't think you've seen, which also Cronenberg, made the first real STD horror film in the 70s. Anyhow, It Follows, which opens with a young, I believe she's shirtless or scantily clad young white woman in heels running out of a suburban looking home. Very heavily stylized opening sequence that really doesn't match where that goes. And again, that STD horror film doesn't work. That it's like a horror film for straight people and how they have sex and but again, the Cummings character, it's the least interesting entry point into this scenario, is this diminished white man.
Who's also like a douchebag, who also has some access because he does have a position of moderate power. So I'm very confused why he's not married to this lady.
Right, but again, to how this story is approached, it's like almost any other person's perspective but this person's would be more interesting. And it also reminded me, getting back to David Robert Mitchell, is Under the Silver Lake, like an LA bizarro neo-noir, which I also really didn't like because of the central white male character that is so wholly unlikable, but also with this comedic edge that I don't understand what we're supposed to feel. Especially because of Cummings' other films where he plays a similar type character, there's always an empathetic kind of poignant side to that.
This video is long and I haven't even gone through my notes. Really quickly, the opening scene when the couple get into the fight after she admits that she met someone, blah blah blah. The man, he just stabs her in the neck. Yeah. That shit was good. I was excited because that scene, the violence was pretty extreme.
Again, though, this heavily stylized opening sequence that doesn't fit with the vibe of the rest of the film.
Okay, then we see Jordan and whatever her name is, Carolyn with PJ and his lady, and I thought that dialogue and acting was crunchy. Okay, the late Carolyn, I'm sure she's a lovely lady.
Oh boy.
I'm sure she's a lovely lady. But I don't think she was the best choice to play this character, because getting back to what I was trying to say, this man, Jordan, doesn't, like, his position in life and where he lives and his attitude, I just think that maybe he needed to be with a woman who maybe looked younger than him and maybe seemed more like a trophy wife. Because this lady looks older. I don't know how old she is, but she does look a little elderly to me. And it seems like she's more almost like a wholesome motherly type to him.
Yes.
Which then was confusing because...
Well, I don't recall if they go into what her occupation is, but again, another perspective might have been more interesting.
Sure. But it just... Again, because to me this seems so unrealistic because I don't attach myself to these standards. Like, if you're willing to like ruin your life because you just want to have sex with this person again or have this experience again, it's like you can do that. You just have to ask. And if the person you're with doesn't want to satisfy that for you, then maybe you don't have to be with them. You're certainly not married to this lady. You could just be like, when this lease is up, get the hell out. So I just think the stakes aren't high enough to understand why this character... I could understand if this was like a 50-year-old man who's been married for 25 years and has never experienced anything and he's like, his head's gonna pop off. That could make more sense, but this guy, I don't know.
Well, it also doesn't establish that they have any real connection because the end of the film, as they're sitting in that cafe, is her saying, we're both gonna be tempted because people are gonna wanna take what we have. And that's something, as being part of a relationship that I get is, you know, you can't give in to every temptation perhaps, but there's never really evidence of them having a foundation.
Right, number one. Number two, who's they to you? Because, like, I just thought it felt very flimsy. Like, y'all don't even seem that much in love from the jump. And then if the ending is, if we're supposed to believe what we saw, you both took advantage of this invitation. So it just seems like maybe you two just need to have an honest conversation and you could alleviate all of this. It's not the world trying to, or they trying to ruin your relationship. It's like you need to communicate. And I feel like this video is more like talking about, like not really talking about the movie, but lots of topics, lots of symbolism. We see Jordan using teeth whitening strips a couple of times.
I thought that was good.
I thought that was good because then we see him, like his front teeth look quite white, and then we see him pull back, and we see his back teeth are kind of rotting, which is obviously symbolic of like he's only concerned about what people see.
The facade.
Yeah. So a lot of potential. I think that's all.
I do like him. I obviously want to see more films from him. It's clear. I also read somewhere that a lot of the dialogue, the industry dialogue that's happening is taken directly from people's experiences.
It's too on the nose.
It's too on the nose because Raymond, their Chinese client, grabs his crotch at this party. Which to me, I immediately thought of Terry Crews.
And then he also mentions Harvey Weinstein
yes.
as well. So yeah, this video is too long. What would you give it?
I would give it 2 out of 5.
I would give it 2 out of 5 as well. I think it is worth a watch with someone else and then talk about it.
And I thought it looked, you know, the film I'd watched just previously to this was shot on an iPhone. So to me, it was like, oh, this kind of, I like how this looks as an LA indie film.
Well, say their name.
Kenneth Wales was the cinematographer, but
no, I mean the movie you watch, because there are movies that have been shot on iPhones that do look good.
Oh, I like Tangerine, yeah.
Right. So what's the movie you saw you didn't?
Oh, Threshold.
Threshold. Okay.
Anyway.
Anything else?
No.
Bye.
Bye.